Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Great to have you on board with us in the conversation. We are going to open up the phone lines earlier today than normal. It's Free for All Friday. We'll talk about anything that's on your mind other than magnetic belts in the outer reaches of the Milky Way galaxy. 888-589-8840, the number to call, 888-589-8840. Now, I'm going to be talking a lot about the Democratic National Convention, about the speeches last night. So if you've got observations that have to do with those elements of this past week in our public life, I would be particularly interested in hearing your observations, your questions, your comments. Now, by the way, I had the story in the stack yesterday. I didn't get to it. Joe Biden gave a speech last night. Now, Joe Biden was not scheduled to speak in prime time. In fact, the Democrats had set this whole thing up so he would not take up a single second of prime broadcasting time. They did not want him on ABC, NBC, or CBS. Now, his speech was scheduled to go for 22 minutes. Joe Biden went for 37 minutes and just trucked right on in to prime time. So he found a way to get his oxygen and suck it out of the room, regardless of the planning. And, what are you going to do? The guy's up there and he's talking. You can't just, put a hook around his neck and yank him off the stage. You're pretty much obligated to sit there and just kind of tough it out. Let's grab clip number 2 if we can, Rob. Now, remember Joe Biden. Remember, he's the guy. He's at this rally and this guy is in a wheelchair and Biden doesn't apparently recognize it at first. Then he says, "Stand up, Chuck." Well, Chuck can't stand up. He's in a wheelchair. And so Biden realizes immediately what it's just a goofball mistake. Let's have everybody stand up for Chuck. Let's all stand up for Chuck. God love him. He can't stand up. Now, here's what Joe Biden said last night. I mean, I'll tell you when I knew that President Obama was going to have was probably in over his head, that he probably, even if his political philosophy was a good one, I did not think from this moment forward that he had the judgment that was necessary to be the president of the United States. It's when he picked Joe Biden as his vice presidential candidate. I knew at that moment, this guy has no idea what he's doing. I mean, Joe Biden has been a walking gaffe machine since 1988. He had to drop out of the 1988 presidential campaign because he was busted for plagiarism charges. And he had to drop out of the race completely. And this is the guy that Barack Obama goes to get. Well, here's what he had to say, Joe Biden, about his dad last night. Let's listen.
My dad respected Barack Obama. I would have respected Barack Obama had he been around.
Oh, man. My dad respected Barack Obama. Wait a minute. He's dead. He's not around. He died before Barack Obama was even born. Sorry about that. God love my dad. He would have respected Barack Obama if he had been around. Now, let's see, who did this poll? The Pew Research Center and the Washington Post did a poll asking people for a one-word description of Joe Biden and Paul Ryan, the vice presidential candidate for the Republicans. Now, here are the words that were most frequently used to describe Paul Ryan. Again, they had to pick one word. He was described as conservative. He was described as intelligent. He was described as good. He was described as young. And he was described as unknown. So unknown, I mean, that's just simply, I don't know much about him. All the rest of them, very, very positive. Now, here are the chief words. Here are the chief words that were used to describe Joe Biden. 38% of the people, when they used a one-word description of Joe Biden, it was a negative word. Here are the most frequently used words to describe Joe Biden: idiot, buffoon, incompetent, and clown. Now, one of the other problems last night, this is a major problem. By the way, this is on the top of my stack. I just want to get this out of the way. This is a pretty cool deal in my judgment because I have a 1965 Pontiac Le Mans V8. That's the thing I drive when I'm not on my 89.7 mile per hour scooter and falling off that thing and breaking my hip. Other than that, I'm in the car. And Texas has just opened a highway. It's a toll road, 41-mile stretch of road. This is between Austin and San Antonio, and you can drive 80 85 miles an hour. Now, it's a toll road, but this is like the Autobahn in Germany. You can go 85 miles an hour. No need for high-speed rail in Texas when you can drive a high-speed automobile. Now, enormous problems with Barack Obama's speech last night. In fact, I am going to spare you. I don't have a single soundbite from President Obama's speech last night. My team is cheering in the background. Not a single one. I wasn't interested in it. I could not bring myself, frankly, I could not force myself to listen to it or watch it. I figured, well, I'll just, I'll read some summaries of it. If he says anything interesting, I'll go back and grab it. I didn't even want to make Jan, my producer, I didn't even want to make her listen to that thing and have to pick stuff out for us to use. So you won't have any sound bites from Barack Obama's speech last night. But what we do have is I culled some of the reaction in the media today to President Obama's speech. Here's the Washington Free Beacon. They kind of summarized the media response to President Obama's speech. It was a nothing burger. It was a total, absolute nothing burger. Here's the Atlantic headline, Obama's convention anticlimax. So in other words, what the Atlantic is saying, this is a Winger Left publication, what the Atlantic is saying, hey, the convention climaxed when Bill Clinton gave his speech. Then the Atlantic says President Obama got up and just sort of didn't do anything special. He gave a warmed-over rehash of his stump speech right down to the exit music. Now, here's the Daily Beast. This is Newsweek, so this is another Winger Left outfit. Obama, a pedestrian and overconfident speech. They said the speech, quote, had nary an interesting thematic device, policy detail, or even one turn of phrase. Bloomberg said that Obama's speech, quote, had shockingly little content in defense of his economic policies over the last 4 years. Anderson Cooper, CNN. It certainly wasn't a speech full of soaring rhetoric like some of his speeches 4 years ago. Politico said a lot of reporters thought it was, quote, lame, and afterwards attendees wondered why, quote, he didn't lift his game for the big moment. Washington Post did not even have a picture of Obama on the front page. Yet last night was the night when he officially accepted the nomination to run for re-election as the president of the U.S., didn't even get his picture on the front page of the Washington Post. The Hill, this was, quote, not among his most lustrous rhetorical moments. Politico said there was a little hope, not a lot of change, and heaps of mockery for Mitt Romney. And the title of their piece was Downsizing the Dream. And Charles Hurt said, look, his speech was just a little more than cold leftovers from 4 years ago. The reality is, and he says cold leftovers that have been rewarmed so many times, they are nearly inedible. You can only reheat something even in the microwave so many times and it just turns leathery and you can't even eat it. The networks were the same. NBC, CBS, ABC. This is Chuck Todd. He was pretty gloomy this morning. He said, look, aides acknowledged this wasn't his most poetic speech, not on par with his previous convention speeches, maybe not even the best convention speech of the week. So the consensus was that his speech was only the third best speech of the week. So President Obama, this soaring rhetorician, couldn't even give the best speech of the convention. George Stephanopoulos said this speech was a different kind of speech. It was more sober, a little more humble. Good Morning America gave him just 5 minutes and 45 seconds out of a 2-hour program. So the networks completely unimpressed. Mother Jones, Winger Left publication, title of their piece is Did Obama Phone It In? And they said it meandered, it skittered, and most of the time it seemed oddly themeless. All of these riffs were just that, short collections of platitudes with no real meat behind them and no promise of what a second term might bring. I didn't feel any real passion in the delivery. And then they say, look, that was only the third best speech of the week. Talking Points Memo, another Winger Left outfit, title of their piece is Back Down to Earth with a Thud. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing you a huge favor I am doing you one of the major favors because I am the kindest talk show host in talk radio, and I am sparing you any of that 39-minute speech last night. Now, here is Charles Krauthammer. This is clip one, Rob. Here's Charles Krauthammer's take. And again, Krauthammer's been observing the political scene for a lot of years. He's a pretty sharp fella. Here's what he had to say about Barack Obama's speech.
I was stunned. This is a man who gave one of the great speeches of our time in 2004. And he gave one of the emptiest speeches I have ever heard on a national stage. Yes, it had cadence, and yes, there were deceptions in it, but that's not what's so striking about it. There was nothing in it. This is a man who believes that government can and should do a lot. There's nothing in here that tells us how he's going to go from today to tomorrow for any of the so-called goals and what government is going to do. What's he going to enact? At least Romney had a 5-point plan. What we heard from Obama was a vision. And he pulls numbers out of a hat, 100,000 new math and science teachers. He's got 600,000 more people working in natural gas. He's got 2 million more trainees. He doesn't say how we get from A to B. It's a vision. I have a vision of America where there's no disease and everybody has a private airplane. But unless I tell you how we get there, I've said nothing.
So that's Charles Krauthammer. You know, it's kind of like cotton candy is what it was. I mean, it's just all air. There's nothing there. There's no substance. You know, you can take cotton candy and you can kind of compress it until it's basically down to nothing but a little clump of sugar. I mean, and so this big giant poof ball of cotton candy, it turns out there's nothing there. There's no substance. It's just mostly air. And that's what Charles Krauthammer is saying. All it was a vision with no plan on how to get there. And Krauthammer says, look, I got a vision for America. My vision for America is nobody's ever sick and everybody's got a private airplane. That's my vision for America. Now, I can give that in a speech, but unless I tell you how we're going to get there, how we're going to get from A to B to D to C to Z, it's just useless as a concept. We'll be back with more Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840.